Alright, so we were at Sprouts the other day and we picked up these, and honestly this is the first time in 5 years I've actually had taquitos, I want to say, because I had never really thought about them in that I could make them myself or that there was even an option on the market, and I found that these were really good, and so I decided that I would try to come up with a recipe on my own to kind of mimic these, just because since it is like the only one of its product that I found, and it was at Sprouts, of course. And yeah, like I said, they're kind of expensive. So I decided to kind of make my own recipe. And if you'd like to figure out how to make your own vegan taquitos and not have to pay a lot of money, because I feel like the ingredients are really cheap, but these are expensive, like I said, well, you can just keep watching because I will show you how to make your own vegan taquitos. Alright, so the ingredients we have here are pretty simple. So depending on the basically protein you want to use or the flavor that you want to use, you can pick between either like this ground crumble, or we used this before. I tried this recipe last. This was pretty good as well. It's basically just like TVP, kind of like chicken shaped, and all I did for this is just rehydrate it with basically like a broth cube, similar container like this, just glass, and just gave it some time to rehydrate. But today I'm not going to be using the chicken, I'm just going to be using these grounds, and I'm just going to be basically reheating them in the microwave. So you actually don't even need to do this over the stove. You can just, basically all you need is just an oven or an air fryer and just a microwave for this recipe. So I'm just following the serving on the back here, so I would say that for half a cup it's going to give you about 6 or so, not exactly, maybe 4. Just depends on how much you really put into each taquito. So that's about how much I'm going to put. Just a cup basically. And then all I'm going to do is just reheat this in the microwave. So I'll just put this in probably about a couple minutes. I might check halfway just to make sure that basically it's cooking and not overcooking, because again, this is going to be cooked in an oven or air fryer, so we don't really need to overdo it here. So it actually didn't need the full 2 minutes. It really depends on your microwave and how powerful it is, but mine was just in for a minute, and basically all I want is just for this to be reheated, and that looks good. Now the next step of this process is actually going to be heating our tortillas. So these are just corn tortillas, and in order to actually roll them, we're going to need to first kind of heat them up to make them more pliable. So I'm just going to measure out about 6 here, and you can do this on the stove top, but I'm just doing this quickly, so I'm just going to do this in my air fryer actually. So I'm just going to set my air fryer to bake and probably just do the temperature around 375, and all I'm going to do is just warm these up, not so that they're crispy, but just so that they're kind of in between where they can kind of still be formed or rolled. So I'm just going to put these on the middle rack here. And again, you can do this on the stove top, like on a burner. Of course, it depends on how much space you have, because you may only be able to fit a couple in one pan. So that's why I like doing it in the air fryer or in the oven, where I can really just heat up a lot and pretty quickly, and then just move on to the next step. Alright, so it's been a few minutes, and the tortillas are more flexible now and able to kind of withstand being rolled, so I'll just bring them out here now. This is kind of what they should look like, just heated but not too much. So we'll just take them over here now, and all I'm going to do is basically just put them on my surface here and bring my filling, and then I'll just do about a spoonful or so, maybe a spoonful, a couple spoonfuls, You don't want to do too much or else they'll be too difficult to roll. It really depends on the size of your spoon. But I would say around a tablespoon or so. And all I'm going to do is just kind of roll them, making sure that the edges are with the tortilla roll in as well. And then all I'm going to do next is just place them here on my air frying rack and just kind of hold them down for a few seconds so that they will just kind of hold their shape, and then just leave it there. And then I'll just move on to my next one. So about a spoonful or so of filling, and then just rolling. And there's actually one ingredient I forgot, because last time I made these I did use like a oil spray, and I'm going to have to do that anyway whenever I put these in the air fryer, because you want them to get crispy, and using an oil spray is probably the best way. But last time I made them I also sprayed the inside as well, so I just do like a spray and then rub the tortillas together so it would get on both, or spray both and then just rub them together so that it just kind of move the oil around. But this time I'm not going to actually spray the inside, I'm only going to spray the outside, so I'm just going to kind of experiment with this one to see what it's like. That would really be the only other ingredient I would use, is just a spray of oil, just because that helps to crisp them up. So this is really just what it should look like. And I just kind of hold it here so it kind of forms a memory, so then when I place it down it should just kind of stay like that, and then it won't like unfurl whenever it goes to actually be cooked. And if you actually use too many tortillas like at once, these kind of older ones that I'm using versus like the ones I did first, well, these might kind of harden up over time, so you just want to make sure that you can do this in smaller batches. That way these don't kind of firm up too much and then they become harder to roll. And I do put them kind of close to each other on this air fryer rack, just so that they kind of, if one of them were to uncurl, then it would just kind of press into the other ones. But after air frying for a little bit, it's perfectly fine to just kind of separate them a bit more. That way they can have more airflow and they can crisp better. So I'm just making 6 of these, but I might end up adding a little bit more to the rack because I have a little bit leftover filling, so I might end up heating up a few more tortillas, which should be perfectly fine. It's better to have less tortillas and make more than just have some tortillas that were started and didn't have filling for them. So. And again, you could do this with like a chicken, like a mock meat chicken. I've just found that using grounds is probably the easiest way. Just because if you use chicken pieces, then they're more likely to kind of slide out whenever it's cooking, and I've just found that the grounds kind of hold together more, and so it's just easier. So I think I am going to actually heat up a few more tortillas, just because I have this amount remaining, which is probably only going to be 3 or 4 tortillas, and then I should be done. Alright, so I'm just going to bring these to my air fryer now, and I just want to make sure that they aren't kind of curling up on me. Some of those older ones that some of those like tortillas I cooked last or used last, they're sort of starting to curl up, so I might just have to watch those, but it should be okay. And again, we'll just use the air fryer for this, but you could also do this in an oven. But one last thing I need to do before I actually put these in is just coat them in some oil. So I'm just going to go and get my oil and it's probably best to just do this over the sink. Alright, so I just have my oil spray here, and the purpose of this is just so that they actually crisp up. I haven't tried this without oil, but it may be possible that they crisp. It may just take longer, but basically I'll just spray the tops, and then also kind of spray from the bottom as well, just to make sure that the bottoms get oiled. And one was sliding around, but that's okay. Just put that back into place, and that should be sufficient. We just really want them to crisp up, especially during this first part of the cooking process. So again, you can use the oven, but I'm just using my air fryer here, and I'm just putting this on the air frying rack right next to the fan, just like that. Now, everyone's oven or air fryer is going to be a little bit different, but what I read online for this recipe basically is just going to be air frying, and it's going to be at, actually it seems high, but it is supposed to be at 425, and I'm just going to start at around 10 minutes. So I would say from 10 to 15 minutes or so, and then check on them. But if it is the case that it needs to go a little bit longer, a little bit less, you could just cook it a little bit longer or a little bit less. But basically what I'm looking for is going to be just sort of like crisping of the edges, and maybe even like a little bit of like singeing of the edges. And after I notice that, then I'm going to go down to a lower temperature, but I'll kind of show you that once we get there. But right now I'm just doing 425 for around 10 minutes. Alright, so because I put these in while it was preheating to 425, they're already done, and it's only been 8 minutes at that temperature. So basically what I'm looking for is essentially this, where it's basically really crispy on the edges specifically. So after it's at looking like this, what I'm going to do now is actually drop the temperature, and at this point you can also spread them out a little bit so that they're not so close, because all we want to really do is just make sure that these undersides that really aren't as crispy get to crisp up as well. So I'm just going to be flipping these around here. Kind of hot, but so I'm just putting these back in, and then I'm going to actually drop the temperature quite a bit lower. So around, we want to do around 350. You can go a little bit lower, a little bit higher, but we want to do 350, and we want to do that for around 10 or 15 minutes. So I'm just going to put mine around 14 minutes, and then I'm just going to keep my eye on these because I don't want them to get like burnt or over crispy. So I'll just check on these probably around the halfway mark. Alright, so my taquitos have been cooking around 350. I guess it went to 355. I don't remember setting that. And my time's up here, 15 seconds left. And this is basically what they're going to look like. I'm just going to get my hot hand here so I can pull this out a little bit more. So they've definitely crisped up basically around the entire taquito. They feel quite crispy now. So yeah, if you wanted to, you could also dehydrate them a little bit more if you like them even crunchier, but basically all we did was just air fry at 425, then we dropped it down to around 350, and that just seems to help them heat up and then keep that warm air circulating so that they get nice and crispy for us. So I believe we made around 10, no, maybe like 8 here, I'm not sure, but it is quite a few. And we did end up using a couple more servings of the grounds for the filling. So if you use about 2 cups of grounds, you can expect to get this many taquitos using this many tortillas. And it really isn't too complicated of a recipe, of course. It is just basically a filling. So I used basically like a mock meat ground, of course corn tortillas, and then I just sprayed them with a little bit of basically olive oil before popping them in the air fryer. So yeah, this is what you could get from that. Alright, so all I'm going to do now is just plate up my taquitos. So this made 9. but I'm sure I could have, you know, moved some filling around and made 10 or 8. But basically I would just probably have a couple, maybe 3. And then I would probably just dip them in this guac that I made. So I put this on the side. And I might have some fresh vegetables alongside, or maybe like refried beans or some Mexican rice or something. And then of course a lime, because I like to like squeeze the lime on top while I'm dipping them. I don't know, it just adds a good flavor. But yeah, basically this was the recipe. I feel like it's pretty simple, and kind of like I said, you don't even need a stovetop. You can just heat up the grounds in the microwave, and then you just need to bake them in an oven or an air fryer. Really, that's all there is to it.